Fly this chopper and I'll marry you. The rooftop fell silent after her words. Maya Turner, the youngest, richest aviation CEO in the city, stood there with a cruel smile on her face, looking down at a barefoot black man who smelled of dust and rain. Everyone laughed because they thought it was a joke. A homeless man, flying her helicopter, marry him? Impossible. But when his eyes slowly lifted to meet hers, the laughter began to fade. There was no fear in those eyes, only a quiet fire, a fire that told them this wasn't the first time his hands had touched a chopper. And this wouldn't end the way they expected. Fly this chopper and I'll marry you. The rooftop went silent after those words left Maya Turner's lips. The wind danced around the helipad, carrying her challenge like a spark thrown into a crowd soaked in gasoline. Laughter erupted, loud, sharp, cruel, as eyes turned toward the man standing at the edge of the platform. He wore no expensive suit, no shiny watch, no polished shoes. Just worn-out boots with a broken sole, a jacket frayed at the edges, and skin tanned by the sun of too many days spent outside. A duffel bag slung over his shoulder looked like it held his whole world. He stood still, silent, as the powerful laughed at him. Maya tilted her chin up, the late afternoon sun reflecting off the diamonds in her ears like a crown of light, as if she ruled the sky beneath her. She had everything: beauty, wealth, power, and to her, this moment was entertainment. Come on, she added with a sharp smirk, if you can fly this helicopter right now, in front of all of us, I'll marry you. No prenup, no questions asked. The crowd roared again, some clapping mockingly. To them, the challenge was a joke. To her, it was a performance. To him, it was something else. Elijah Cole did not flinch. He didn't look down, didn't shuffle his feet. His eyes slowly rose to meet hers, dark brown, steady, filled not with humiliation, but with something far more dangerous: quiet confidence. Maya noticed it for half a second, and something flickered inside her chest. But she buried it quickly beneath a wall of arrogance. She crossed her arms, her tailored black suit hugging her like armor. What's the matter? She teased. Scared? He didn't answer. Instead, his lips curled just slightly, not enough to be called a smile, but enough to unsettle her. I'll fly it, he said finally, his voice low and steady, carrying through the wind like a promise. The laughter around them turned into a murmur. Some whispered to each other, amused. Is he serious? He's out of his mind. He doesn't even look like he can afford a bus ticket. Maya chuckled under her breath. Oh really? She mocked. Do you even know what a cyclic or a collective is? No response, just the same steady gaze. Fine then, she said louder, turning so her board members could hear. If he crashes, which he will, he leaves my property and never shows his face here again. Deal? Elijah nodded. Deal. Security guards looked uncertain, glancing at each other for permission. This wasn't supposed to happen, but Maya raised her hand, signaling to let him through. She wanted to see him fall. She wanted to see reality crush whatever fantasy he carried in his tired bones. The crowd parted slowly as Elijah walked toward the gleaming black helicopter, a Turner Aviation HX-9, the pride of her company. Its polished surface reflected the blue of the sky, its rotor blades waiting like a sleeping beast. Elijah placed his palm against the cold metal, and for the first time, something shifted. Not in the machine, not in the air, in him. No one there knew who he really was. No one knew that before he became the man who slept on benches, he had been Captain Elijah Cole, one of the most skilled helicopter pilots the Air Force had ever seen. No one knew the medals tucked away in a storage box he no longer had the key to. No one knew the firestorm of his past, the missions, the crash, the loss. They saw a homeless man. What they didn't see was a warrior with wings carved into his soul. Maya leaned against the railing, amused. Well, Captain Nobody, she whispered, show us what you've got. Elijah climbed into the cockpit like a man coming home. His hands moved without hesitation. Switches, gauges, levers. It was muscle memory, the kind of familiarity that only came from years of living in the sky. A few board members frowned, confused. One of the engineers tilted his head. He knows the startup sequence, he whispered to another. That's not random, he's doing it exactly right. Maya heard them, but she shook her head, refusing to believe it. Then came the sound, deep, rhythmic, powerful. The rotor blades came alive, slicing through the air like the heartbeat of a giant. The wind whipped through the rooftop, catching dresses and suits, blowing Maya's hair loose from its perfect bun. Elijah sat with his spine straight, eyes focused, hands steady. The chopper began to lift. 1 foot, 2, then it hovered smoothly, as if weightless. The crowd gasped. Maya's smirk faltered for the first time. She took a step forward, gripping the railing, unable to look away. Elijah tilted the nose slightly forward, rotated left, then right, perfectly controlled maneuvers. This wasn't luck, this wasn't guessing, this was mastery. The same people who had laughed seconds ago now stood silent, their eyes wide, their breath caught in their throats. The engineer whispered, "This guy's good. I mean, really good." For Maya Turner, the world's most confident woman, something unfamiliar crawled up her spine. A feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. Unease. Elijah rose higher, the city sprawling beneath him like a map. And for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. The air didn't care that he had slept under bridges. The wind didn't care about bank accounts. Up here, he was who he had always been, a pilot. A man of the sky. He spun the helicopter in a tight circle, then leveled it with the kind of precision only combat pilots mastered. He wasn't just proving a point. He was reclaiming a piece of himself. Below, Maya stared, her mouth slightly open. She tried to laugh again, but the sound never made it past her lips. The man she had mocked was flying her company's most advanced chopper better than most of her pilots. When he finally brought the helicopter down, it wasn't with a crash, or a stumble, or fear. It was with elegance, like a dancer bowing after a flawless performance. The rotor slowed, the noise faded, and a strange stillness settled on the rooftop. Elijah opened the door and stepped out calmly, brushing a streak of dust from his jacket. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked straight at her. "You said if I fly it, you'll marry me," he said, voice even, gaze unbroken. The board members shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, not with fear, but with something she couldn't explain. Who are you?" she asked finally, trying to mask the tremor in her voice with arrogance. Elijah tilted his head. "No one," he said simply, and began walking past her. For a second, she could have let him go. She could have laughed, thrown the whole thing away as a game. But something inside her wouldn't let her. Maybe it was the way he touched that machine like it was a living thing. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not like she was powerful, not like she was untouchable, but like he saw straight through her walls. She spun around. "Wait," she called out, and her own voice surprised her. He stopped, his back still to her. "Who taught you to fly like that?" she demanded. He didn't turn around. "Life," he said softly. The wind carried his words, and they wrapped around her like a puzzle she suddenly wanted to solve. Her assistant approached nervously. "Ma'am, we should call security. This man is trespassing." But Maya didn't move. Her gaze stayed on Elijah as he slowly walked toward the stairwell leading back down to the streets. The crowd began to disperse, but the image of that flight clung to them like smoke after a fire. In that moment, Maya Turner, the woman who believed money controlled everything, felt something she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to know. As Elijah disappeared into the stairwell, she whispered to herself, "Who are you?" She didn't know that the answer to that question would unravel everything she thought she knew about power, love, and pain. The night after the rooftop challenge, Maya Turner lay awake in her penthouse suite, surrounded by walls of glass and silence. The city lights glittered beneath her like stars that had fallen from the sky, but for the first time, they didn't give her comfort. She had built her life on control, power, and perfection, and yet one man, a stranger from the streets, had shaken the ground beneath her. The way he touched that helicopter, the way he looked at her without fear, the way he said, "life," like the word itself carried a war inside it, it haunted her. She sat up, pushing away her silk sheets, walked barefoot to the window, and pressed her hand against the cold glass. "Who are you, Elijah Cole?" she whispered into the night. The next morning, she told herself she'd forget it, that the incident was just a strange story to tell at cocktail parties. But when she walked into the Turner Aviation hangar, she saw something that stopped her breath. Elijah was there, standing near the same helicopter, wearing the same worn-out jacket, but this time not as an intruder. The head engineer was talking to him, no, listening to him, like a student before a teacher. "Morning," Maya said sharply, hiding her surprise beneath her usual armor. The engineer turned quickly, nervous. "Ma'am, this man, I know who he is," she interrupted, her voice clipped. She didn't, not really. But she wasn't going to admit that. Elijah didn't look at her right away. He was tracing the edge of the rotor blade gently, as if the machine was something fragile and alive. Then he finally turned, meeting her eyes with that same steady gaze that made her heartbeat stumble. "I didn't break any rules," he said calmly. "Your security guard let me in. Because you impressed them," she replied before she could stop herself. "People like to watch a good show." He tilted his head slightly. "Was it just a show?" Her breath caught for a moment, but she brushed it off with a small scoff. "You got lucky, that's all." But luck didn't explain the way her engineers looked at him with respect. It didn't explain why a man with no money, no address, and no family could talk about turbine dynamics like he wrote the manual himself. When the head engineer quietly handed her a file showing how Elijah had corrected one of their test blueprints overnight, a mistake even their senior pilots had missed, she realized this wasn't just some drifter. "You have no idea who he is, do you?" the engineer whispered to her later. And for once, Maya didn't. Hours passed, and curiosity became an ache she couldn't ignore. She called one of her people, a private investigator she'd used before. "I need everything on Elijah Cole," she said. Everything. When the file came in later that night, she sat at her desk, staring at the manila folder like it held a secret she wasn't ready to know. She opened it slowly, and what she saw burned through every wall she'd built around her heart. Captain Elijah Cole, decorated Air Force pilot, 2 distinguished flying cross medals, 9 rescue operations, over 3,000 flight hours. But then the pages turned darker. A mission in Kandahar, a chopper under fire. He flew back into a combat zone after everyone told him it was suicide, to save a trapped unit. He did it, he saved them, but on the way out, the helicopter took a hit. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Mark Harris, his best friend, didn't make it. Elijah survived, barely. The Air Force called him a hero. The newspapers called him a miracle. But Elijah called himself one thing only: guilty. He left the service 2 years later. Couldn't fly, couldn't breathe inside a home without seeing fire. He lost everything. His house, his medals, his will to belong. That's how the sky's finest became a man sleeping on park benches. Maya stared at the black and white photo of Elijah in uniform. The man who had stood barefoot on her rooftop had once stood before the world as a hero. Her throat tightened. Shame burned through her. She had mocked him, humiliated him in front of everyone, called him worthless, and all this time, he had carried a weight she couldn't even imagine. The next day, she walked to the hangar again. This time, not as a CEO, as a woman with questions. Elijah was sitting near the chopper, his back against the wall, eyes distant like they were fixed on something no one else could see. "I know," she said softly. He looked up slowly. "You know what? About Kandahar," she whispered. He froze, the air between them thickening like a storm cloud. "You shouldn't have dug into my life," he said, his voice low. "That's all I have left. I had to," she admitted, her voice shaking. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you." For the first time, something cracked in Elijah's eyes. Pain. Deep, old pain. "You shouldn't," he said flatly. "I'm not your kind of story." But she took a step closer. "Maybe you're exactly the kind of story I need." Her words hung in the air like a confession neither of them expected. Elijah stood up, taller than she remembered, the shadow of a soldier still in his posture. "Why does it matter to you?" he asked. "You're a CEO. I'm nothing." "You're not nothing," she said fiercely, surprising even herself. "You're the only person I've seen make that machine come alive like it was breathing. You're the only one who looked at me like..." She trailed off. Like what? Like she wasn't untouchable, like she was just a woman. Elijah laughed bitterly. "Machines don't care who you are. They don't care about money or titles. They only care if your hands are steady when the world is on fire." Maya took another step closer. "Then teach me," she whispered. "Show me what it's like to see the world from up there, the way you do." He stared at her for a long time, and for the first time in years, someone's eyes reached into the part of him he had locked away. Against every wall he'd built, against every reason to walk away, he finally nodded. "One flight," he said. "That's all." The following dawn, the two of them stood on the helipad as the first light brushed the city in gold. Elijah walked her through the controls with the patience of a man who remembered teaching rookies how to survive. "This isn't just a machine," he said softly. "It's a promise. When you're up there, everything that matters is the wind, the sky, and your heartbeat. Nothing else." She listened, not as a student, but as someone who wanted to understand him. When the rotors began to spin, Maya's heart pounded. He sat beside her, steady, calm, like the world couldn't touch him here. "Breathe," he said. She did. "Now, lift." The helicopter began to rise, slowly, smoothly, and for the first time in her life, Maya Turner, the woman who had built empires, felt weightless. She let out a soft gasp. The city fell away beneath them like a dream. "You feel that?" Elijah said, and for the first time, there was something soft in his voice. "That's freedom." She turned to look at him, but he was staring out the window, a faint, haunted smile on his face. She saw it then. This was where he belonged. Not on the ground, not in the shadows, but in the sky. When they landed, neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy with something new, understanding. She turned to him finally. "Why did you stop flying?" He didn't answer right away. Then he whispered, "Because the last time I flew, the person sitting next to me didn't make it home." She felt her throat tighten. "It wasn't your fault." His eyes hardened. "You weren't there." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "But I'm here now." Something in Elijah's chest cracked then. The walls, the guilt, the silence. "Do you know what it's like?" he whispered. "To have the thing you love the most turn into the thing that haunts you." Maya's eyes glistened. "Yes," she said softly. "I've built everything I have on control because I was terrified of losing everything again. But maybe," she paused, swallowing hard, "maybe the only way to stop being haunted is to start living again." The sun dipped lower, painting the helipad in orange and gold. Elijah looked at her, really looked at her, not the CEO, not the woman who mocked him, but the woman who saw him. For years, he had carried his guilt like chains. For years, she had hidden behind her power like armor. But in that moment, two broken souls saw the sky in each other's eyes. He stepped forward, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. "You still owe me something," he said quietly, and her heart skipped. "What?" she whispered. "You said if I fly it," he began. She laughed softly, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "I said I'd marry you." "Yeah," he said, his voice low, warm, aching. "But I don't need that." He looked at her like the sky itself. "I just need someone who believes I can fly again." Her hand trembled as she reached up, touching his face gently, the way you touch something fragile you don't want to break. "Then fly, Elijah," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Fly with me." The wind picked up, brushing through their hair, lifting the silence into something holy. Two people, one who lost everything in the sky, one who thought she owned the sky, standing on the edge of something real. That night, as the city lights flickered below and the helicopter's rotor slowly came to rest, Maya and Elijah stood together on the rooftop, not as a CEO and a homeless man, but as two souls finding their way back to the light. He didn't ask her for her world. She didn't ask him to forget his pain. They simply stood, and for the first time, neither of them felt alone. Right finger if this story touched your heart. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Gentle Words, where every story reminds us that behind every scar, there's a sky waiting to be flown again.